are the others? Tell me now, human, or this will be your last breath.
The contract arrived sealed in black wax. No crest, no signature, only the sigil of the Black Fawn Guild pressed deep into the surface, a jagged mark shaped like a broken crescent blade. It was left in the usual place, a hollowed stone beneath the lower terrace of the city's old aqueduct, where shadows lingered longer than daylight dared. She found it at dusk. The city of Velmora stretched beneath the fading sky, towers etched in gold by the last light. Human banners hung from balconies. Lanterns flickered awake one by one as merchants closed stalls and scholars retreated indoors. It was a city that pretended to value ideas over steel. She valued neither. She valued precision. Her name within the guild was Veshera. No surname, no lineage spoken. Blackfang erased pasts. It sharpened futures. She broke the wax seal carefully and unrolled the parchment. The script was clean and deliberate. Target: Auric Thorn. Occupation: political scholar. Charge: destabilization of inter-kingdom treaties. Location: Eastern Quarter, Velmora. Priority: immediate. A small pouch of advance coin had been bound within the fold. Heavy, well-funded, high value. Veshera read the page twice, memorizing every detail before feeding the parchment to a small flame cupped in her palm. The paper curled into ash without ceremony. A scholar, not a general, not a warlord. She did not question contracts. Questioning dulled instinct. Blackfang taught one truth: hesitation kills. Still, she preferred clarity. She moved through Velmora that night unseen, armor concealed beneath layered traveler's cloth. Her skin bore the faint gray-green tone of her people, but she knew how to navigate human cities, how to walk where torches burned brightest, so suspicion drifted elsewhere. Auric Thorn resided in the Eastern Quarter near the university spires. A modest estate, guarded lightly but not negligently. No heavy military presence. No elite escorts. Strange for someone accused of destabilizing treaties. She perched along a tiled rooftop opposite his residence as night deepened fully. From there, she watched patterns, servants entering and leaving, candlelight shifting behind windows, a lone figure moving between rooms carrying stacks of parchment. Auric Thorn did not look like threat. He looked tired, thin shoulders bent beneath the weight of books rather than armor. Dark hair falling loose across his brow as he leaned over a desk cluttered with ink and maps. He worked late. That suggested either obsession or urgency. Veshera observed until the household quieted and outer lights dimmed. One guard paced the front gate. Another lingered near the rear courtyard. Predictable. She descended soundlessly along the side wall just after midnight, slipping between shadows with trained ease. A thin blade rested at her hip, balanced perfectly for swift, silent work. The rear guard never saw her. He only felt a sharp pressure at the base of his neck before consciousness faded. She laid him gently against the stone to avoid unnecessary noise. Inside, corridors were narrow and unguarded. She moved past tapestries and shelves lined with scrolls, following faint candlelight toward a study at the back of the estate. The door stood slightly ajar. Voices murmured faintly within. She paused. There was only one voice, reading aloud to himself. If trade routes are manipulated through fear, then the treaty fractures from within. Her brow furrowed faintly. He wasn't writing propaganda. He was analyzing something. She pushed the door open slowly. Auric Thorn looked up immediately. Not startled, not panicked, just aware. His gaze fell to the blade now visible in her hand. I wondered how long it would take, he said quietly. Most men begged. Most reached for hidden weapons. He did neither. You know why I am here, she said evenly. Yes, he replied. And you do not attempt escape? There is nowhere to run, he said calmly. Not from what sent you. That answer was wrong. Targets rarely acknowledge the existence of those who commissioned their deaths. She stepped fully into the room, closing the door behind her. You destabilize treaties, she said. I expose those who destabilize them, he corrected. The distinction meant nothing to a blade. You have been paid to silence me, he continued. Her grip did not waver. You speak too freely. Because killing me will not prevent what is coming. She moved closer, blade angled toward his throat. You assume I hesitate. I assume you were given incomplete truth. That struck deeper than expected. She did not show it. You are scholar, she said coldly. Not strategist. And you are assassin, he replied. Not fool. Silence stretched between them. His heartbeat did not race wildly. His hands did not tremble. He studied her, not as monster. As person. You were hired by those who profit from war, he said quietly. And my work threatens that profit. The blade hovered inches from his throat. Veshra had never failed a contract. Never hesitated. Never questioned. Yet something in his calm certainty disrupted the clean lines of execution. Outside, wind brushed faintly against shutters. Inside, candlelight flickered between steel and skin. The contract was clear. The payment was substantial. The guild expected completion. But for the first time in years, Veshra felt the faintest fracture in instinct. And she did not yet understand why. The candle between them burned low, wax spilling unevenly down its side. Veshra's blade rested a breath away from Auric Thorn's throat, close enough that one measured motion would end the contract cleanly. She had ended lives for less. For coin lighter than the pouch waiting in her quarters. For causes she never needed to understand. This should have been simple. Your silence suggests doubt, Auric said quietly. My silence suggests patience, she replied. Then be patient a moment longer. She did not lower the blade. You claim I was misled, she said. By whom? By the same people who placed that coin in your guild's hands, he answered. Merchant syndicates funding border raids under false flags. Noble houses spreading rumors of treaty violations. I have proof. Everyone facing death claims proof. Yes, he agreed calmly. But most of them are lying. The ease with which he acknowledged that unsettled her. You destabilize negotiations, she pressed. I expose false destabilization, he corrected. There is a difference. She studied his desk quickly, maps pinned with colored thread, trade routes marked in red ink, correspondence sealed and unsealed in uneven stacks. It was not the workspace of a propagandist. It was the workspace of someone chasing patterns. Your research interferes with profit, he continued. Trade thrives in peace, but certain contracts thrive in war. Escort fees increase. Weapons sell. Supply shortages inflate margins. Coin again, she said flatly. Yes. She shifted slightly, adjusting her stance without lowering the blade. If you possess proof, she said, why are you not protected by your crown? Because my findings implicate those close to it. That, at least, sounded plausible. Power insulated itself. You expect me to believe merchants risk hiring Blackfang? She asked. I expect you to know how much coin buys silence. Her jaw tightened faintly. Blackfang did not ask origin of payment. It asked only amount and target. You are skilled, Auric said carefully. You move through my guard unnoticed. That will be last compliment you offer. Perhaps, he said. But answer one question before you finish. She did not grant permission verbally. He continued anyway. Why would those truly concerned about treaty stability hire an assassin rather than discredit me publicly? She said nothing. Why not challenge my research? He pressed. Why not expose flaws? Why choose death? Her mind moved faster than her expression revealed. Public debate risked attention. Death erased noise. You speak convincingly, she said. I speak urgently. The blade pressed closer. A thin bead of blood formed where steel touched skin. Then give me reason not to complete this. Auric inhaled slowly. In the locked drawer beneath my maps, he said, nodding slightly. There are letters between 3 trade consortium heads and a border militia commander. The dates align with recent skirmishes blamed on orc raiders. Her grip tightened reflexively. That accusation is common. And false in those cases, he said. The raids were staged. Mercenaries paid to wear clan armor. Enough to provoke retaliation. Her thoughts flickered briefly. Reports of rising tensions along the border. Rumors of orc aggression spreading quickly. You expect me to verify this now? She asked. Yes. And give you time to escape? He gave a faint, humorless smile. You are between me and the only exit. True. She studied him again, pulse steady despite blood at his throat. You understand, she said quietly, that if this is deception, your death will not be swift. I assumed as much. No tremor. No flinch. She withdrew the blade by a fraction. Not mercy, not decision. Evaluation. Slowly, without breaking eye contact, she stepped sideways toward the desk. One hand remained ready to strike if he moved. She knelt and slid the indicated drawer open. Inside lay sealed letters. She broke the first seal quickly, scanning lines under dim candlelight. Trade volumes. Security contracts. Border disturbances described as necessary volatility. Her eyes narrowed. The second letter referenced increased orc aggression narratives, improving trade leverage. A third referenced an upcoming assassination likely to secure silence before formal exposure. Her jaw hardened. The phrasing was indirect, but unmistakable. "You forged these," she said flatly. "Cross-check the seals," he replied. "Guild contacts in the lower docks can confirm authenticity." She recognized one of the signet marks faintly. A merchant lord known for heavy investments in military supply chains. The blade lowered slightly, no longer touching his throat. "You were meant to die before publishing this," she said. "Yes." "And my guild was convenient tool." "Yes." Silence thickened between them. Outside, distant footsteps echoed faintly in the courtyard. Too many. Too coordinated. Alric heard it too. "They won't rely on you alone," he said quietly. Veshra turned toward the window slit. Shadowed movement crossed the outer wall. Not city guard. Too precise. Too deliberate. "They sent others," she murmured. "Yes. If I kill you now, the letters remain." "Yes. And they still profit." "Yes." A sharp crash sounded below, with splintering. The guard she had subdued earlier groaned faintly. They had discovered him. Veshra's decision crystallized not from compassion, but calculation. She sheathed her blade in one fluid motion and drew a second from her back. "You will stay behind me," she said. Alric blinked once. "You are not." Quiet. The study door burst inward as masked figures surged through. Not Black Fong. Mercenaries. And this time, they had come to finish what Coin had started. The first mercenary through the doorway died before his boots cleared the threshold. Veshra moved without hesitation, blade flashing upward beneath his guard and severing the artery at his throat. He collapsed forward, blood spraying across Auric's maps. Two more surged in behind him, crossbows raised. "Down," she snapped. Auric dropped instantly as bolts shattered glass and buried themselves into the far wall. Veshra kicked the heavy study table sideways, sending it crashing into one attacker's knees. She closed distance before he could recover, driving her blade cleanly between his ribs. The third retreated into the hall, shouting for reinforcements. They had not expected resistance. They had expected her to have completed the contract. That realization settled like iron in her chest. She had been insurance. If she succeeded, the scholar died quietly. If she failed, or questioned, the mercenaries finished it loudly and blamed the chaos on political unrest. Efficient. Disposable. Bootsteps thundered up the staircase. "Back exit," she said sharply. "There isn't one," Auric replied, scrambling upright. She cursed under her breath. Of course there wasn't. Scholars did not design escape routes. She moved to the hallway, peering around the corner. For more masked figures advanced in tight formation, disciplined but not elite. Hired blades, not guild-trained assassins. They recognized her immediately. "That's the orc," one barked. "Kill them both." So it was no longer subtle. Veshra met their charge head-on. Steel rang sharply in the narrow corridor. She parried a downward strike and slammed her elbow into an attacker's throat, snapping cartilage with a brutal crack. Another lunged low. She pivoted, letting his blade scrape across her shoulder guard before driving her knee into his jaw. A bolt tore past her ear and struck the wall inches from Auric's head. "Stay behind cover," she ordered. "I am," he shouted back, dragging a fallen mercenary's shield upright. She registered that quickly. He adapted fast for someone untrained. Two attackers pressed her simultaneously. She retreated one step deliberately, drawing them into the tightest part of the corridor where they could not flank. Her blade carved upward in a tight arc, severing tendons. One fell screaming. The other hesitated, fatal mistake. She ended him cleanly. Silence fell heavy for a heartbeat. Then another crash sounded below. More entering through the courtyard. Too many. She stepped back into the study and slammed the door shut, wedging the broken table leg beneath the handle. "They won't stop," Auric said, breath uneven but controlled. "No. You've made your choice." "I have not," she replied sharply. "You just did." She ignored that. Her mind ran through angles, distances, odds. If she fled alone, She could disappear before dawn. Black Fong would question her failure, but she could claim interference. If she stayed, she was rogue. No guild sanctuary. No contracts. No return. A heavy impact struck the study door, splintering wood. They don't want witnesses, Auric said. No. They expected you to kill me quietly. Yes. And now they'll silence both. The second impact cracked the doorframe. She looked at him directly for the first time since the attack began. You understand what protecting you means, she said. Yes. I lose my guild. Yes. I become hunted. Yes. And you? She demanded. I become leverage, he replied. Blunt. Honest. The door burst inward under a third blow. She moved before thought could intervene. She stepped forward, not as executioner, as shield. The first mercenary through the shattered doorway met her blade mid-strike. She drove him backward into his own ally, disrupting their formation long enough to seize momentum. She fought with ruthless efficiency now, not conserving energy, not pacing for stealth. This was open defiance. Steel clashed in wild echoes across the study walls. Auric crouched low behind the overturned desk, using fallen furniture as barrier while Veshera carved space around him with lethal precision. An attacker broke past her guard, lunging toward the scholar with dagger raised. She did not hesitate. She threw her secondary blade. It struck true through the man's throat before he reached his target. The remaining mercenaries faltered. They had expected hired silence, not resistance from both sides. Retreat, one shouted finally. They fled as quickly as they had entered, vanishing into the night through broken windows and courtyard shadows. The house fell into ringing quiet. Veshera stood in the wreckage, breathing steady despite the blood soaking into the floorboards. Auric rose slowly from behind cover. You protected me, he said quietly. I protected the truth, she replied. He studied her carefully. You've crossed a line. She knew that. Black Fong did not forgive incomplete contracts. They did not tolerate divided loyalty. She retrieved her thrown blade from the fallen mercenary and wiped it clean on his cloak. When they report this, she said, voice flat, the guild will mark me rogue. And if they do, she sheathed her weapon with deliberate finality. Then I will ensure the architects of this contract regret underestimating me. Outside, distant alarm bells began ringing across Velmora. Guards responding too late. The night had shifted. She had entered as assassin. She now stood as something far more dangerous. A blade turned against those who thought they wielded it. Velmora did not sleep easily after blood was spilled in its scholar quarter. By the time city guards stormed the estate, Veshera had already moved. She dragged Auric through a narrow servant passage she had mapped during her surveillance nights earlier, exiting through a concealed wine cellar hatch into the alley beyond. Sirens and shouts echoed behind them, but confusion worked in their favor. Witnesses would describe masked men, broken doors. A fire briefly sparked and extinguished. No one would describe an orc assassin shielding a human scholar. Not yet. They moved through back streets thick with lantern smoke and damp cobblestone shadows. Auric struggled to keep pace, breath ragged, hands still ink-stained from his work. You are injured, he said quietly, noticing the shallow cut across her shoulder. It is nothing. It is bleeding. It will clot. Footsteps sounded behind them, measured, controlled. Not city guard. Veshera stopped abruptly and pulled Auric into a recessed archway. 3 figures crossed the far end of the street, cloaked in dark leather trimmed with faint silver thread at the cuffs. Black Fong. They moved with unmistakable precision. They already know, Auric whispered. Yes. Black Fong did not wait for confirmation. The moment a contract destabilized, they responded. And tonight, she had destabilized everything. One of the cloaked figures paused mid-step, head turning slightly as if scenting the air. Veshera pressed Auric further into shadow, one hand hovering near her blade. The figure lingered, then moved on. Not yet certain, but close. We cannot remain in the city, she said. Where do we go? Somewhere neither guild nor merchants control. That is vague. Survival often is. They crossed 2 districts before she led him toward the old river docks, abandoned warehouses lining a stretch of black water reflecting fractured moonlight. She chose one structure with partial roof collapse, high rafters intact enough for concealment. Inside, dust and rope coils lay undisturbed. She moved quickly, securing entry points, checking vantage angles. You've done this before, Alric observed. I was trained for it. Not for protection. She did not answer. Because he was right. Black Fang trained hunters, not guardians. Yet tonight, her instincts had shifted mid-strike. She replayed the moment in the study, the mercenary lunging past her toward him. She had not calculated. She had reacted. That disturbed her more than the guild's pursuit. You understand what comes next, she said, turning toward him. Yes. They will send someone skilled. Yes. Perhaps my former mentor. Alric swallowed faintly. Will that change your resolve? No. The word came faster than thought. Outside, a faint scrape echoed against warehouse brick. She moved instantly, pushing Alric behind a crate stack. The warehouse door creaked open slowly. A single figure stepped inside. Tall, lean, familiar. Silver thread cuffs catching faint light. Her mentor, Kael'rith. He removed his hood without urgency. Veshera, he said evenly. She stepped into view. Kael'rith, you failed. I chose. He tilted his head slightly. The guild does not recognize that distinction. I am aware. His gaze shifted briefly toward the crates where Alric hid. You protect the target. Yes. Why? The contract was corrupted. All contracts are corrupted by someone's interest. Not like this. He studied her more closely now. You risk exile. I know. You risk death. I know. And for a human scholar? For the truth behind the contract. Kael'rith's expression did not shift, but something hardened in his posture. You were one of our finest, he said quietly. Precise. Unquestioning. That was the flaw. He drew his blade slowly, not in rage. In inevitability. The guild cannot allow defiance. And I cannot allow manipulation, she replied. They moved simultaneously. Steel clashed in the dim warehouse air with sharp, controlled violence. Kael'rith was faster than the mercenaries, cleaner in his strikes. He anticipated her angles because he had taught them. She adapted. She broke rhythm deliberately, abandoning formal Black Fang patterns for unpredictable motion. A shallow cut scored her forearm. She countered with a low sweep that forced him back a step. Emotion clouds you, he said calmly as blades locked briefly. No, she replied. Clarity does. He disengaged suddenly and flicked a throwing knife toward the crate stack. She reacted instantly, deflecting it midair before it reached Alric. That was the moment Kael'rith needed. His blade sliced across her side, shallow but precise. She did not retreat. Instead, she drove forward with brute force rather than finesse, shoulders slamming into his chest. The impact broke his footing. Leave, she said through clenched teeth. Return, he countered. I cannot. Silence flickered between strikes. Finally, he stepped back. Not defeated. Assessing. The guild will escalate, he warned. I expect nothing less. His eyes lingered on her a moment longer. You have severed your oath. Yes. He pulled his hood back over his head. Then you are no longer Black Fang. He vanished into the night as quietly as he had entered. The warehouse fell still. Alric emerged slowly from behind the crates. You fought your own teacher, he said. Yes. And lived. For now. She pressed a hand briefly to the cut at her side, feeling warm blood beneath leather. The guild would not stop. The merchants would not stop. The crown might not protect them. But she had made the choice fully now. No hesitation. No fracture. She had entered Velmora as an assassin. She would leave it as something far more dangerous. A blade that refused to be wielded. They left Velmora before dawn. Smoke from the scholar quarter still drifted faintly over rooftops as Veshera guided Alric through drainage tunnels that emptied beyond the outer trade walls. She knew the routes not because she had studied maps, but because Black Fang trained its operatives to memorize exits from every major city. Do they control the gates? Alric asked quietly as they emerged into scrubland beyond the stone perimeter. They control information, she replied. That is worse. Black Fang would not flood the city with visible search parties. That would expose weakness. Instead, they would whisper, offer coin to dockmasters, question stable hands, track supply purchases. They would close invisible nets. Veshera moved quickly across uneven terrain, choosing ridgelines rather than roads. Roads were watched. Inns were listened to. Wells were remembered. By midday, Velmora was a distant outline behind them. Alric stumbled more than once over rocky ground. You are not accustomed to this pace, she observed. I am accustomed to libraries, he replied dryly. She slowed only slightly, then learned quickly. They reached a narrow stretch of pine forest by late afternoon. Veshera paused at its edge, studying disturbed needles and faint impressions in soil. Scouts, she murmured. Guild. No. She crouched lower. Merchant hires, she clarified. Different tread. Heavier boots. They're searching for me. For both. A branch snapped somewhere deeper in the trees. Too deliberate for accident. She pulled Auric behind a fallen trunk. Do not speak, she whispered. Two men moved through the forest ahead, scanning underbrush with crossbows raised. They wore no guild silver thread, just dark traveling leathers and coin-bought confidence. Reward doubled, one muttered. Alive or dead. They didn't say which, the other replied. That confirmed it. The conspiracy had escalated. They no longer relied solely on Blackfang to erase the scholar quietly. They had widened the net. When the men turned their backs to reposition, Veshera moved. She crossed the distance in 3 silent strides and struck the nearest man at the base of his skull. He fell instantly. The second barely had time to inhale before her blade pressed against his throat. Who pays you? She demanded. He swallowed hard. Trade syndicate, he stammered. Eastern contracts. Names. Don't know, just coin. She struck him unconscious before panic could grow louder. Auric stepped from behind cover, pale but steady. They're not subtle anymore. No. They want this ended quickly. Yes. He exhaled slowly. Then we must move faster than their fear. She studied him briefly. You adapt quickly. I prefer breathing. A faint sound echoed behind them. Not mercenaries. Softer. Precise. Guild. Veshera's spine stiffened. They're here, she said. 3 shapes emerged between the trees. Blackfang assassins moving in coordinated silence. No wasted motion. No shouted warnings. They did not address her. They did not threaten. They advanced. Stay behind me, she ordered. I have nowhere else to stand, Auric replied. The first assassin struck with twin blades, aiming high and low simultaneously. She parried upward and twisted sideways, but the second attacker exploited the opening, driving her backward. They were not testing. They were eliminating. A third assassin circled toward Auric. She pivoted sharply, abandoning her defensive stance to intercept. Her blade clashed with the third assassin's dagger inches from Auric's chest. You hesitate, one of them said coldly. No, she replied. She broke formation intentionally, diving low, forcing them to adjust angles they had trained her to expect. She used uneven ground to her advantage, drawing them toward the fallen mercenaries' bodies to disrupt footing. Steel flashed in quick succession. One assassin faltered as she disarmed him with a brutal wrist twist. She followed with a strike that ended him cleanly. The second pressed harder, blade grazing her thigh. Pain flared, but she did not retreat. She countered with unexpected force, driving her shoulder into his sternum and sending him crashing into a pine trunk. The third paused, assessing, then withdrew slightly. We will report this, he said evenly. Do, she replied. He vanished into the trees. The forest fell still again. Auric stared at the fallen assassin. They were your own. Yes. And they did not speak your name. They will not. She pressed cloth against the cut at her thigh, binding it tightly. You cannot fight both guild and mercenaries forever, he said quietly. I do not intend to. Then what is the plan? She stood slowly despite the pain. We stop running. He blinked. By doing what? By striking the source. Merchants. Yes. And the guild. They follow coin. He studied her carefully. You no longer speak like assassin. I no longer am one. Silence stretched briefly. You saved me again, he said. She adjusted her blade at her hip. I saved the mission. What mission? She met his gaze steadily. To end this before it consumes more than just us. The wind shifted through the pines. Somewhere beyond the trees, both coin and guild were tightening their pursuit. But for the first time since the contract arrived in black wax, Veshera was not reacting. She was choosing where the next strike would land. They reached the capital 3 nights later under false names and borrowed cloaks. Veshera did not favor cities, too many angles, too many eyes, but this one held something they needed. Beneath the royal archive, sealed within stone vaults older than the crown itself, were trade ledgers and private correspondences that could expose the merchant syndicates beyond rumor. If the letters in my study implicated them, Alric said quietly as they stood beneath the towering archive spire, the original contracts will bury them. If they still exist, Veshra replied. They will, he said. Men who worship coin record everything. The archive was guarded, not heavily, but thoroughly. Scholars passed freely during daylight. At night, only a skeleton watch remained. Veshra observed rotation patterns from a neighboring rooftop, while Alric sketched interior layouts from memory. You've been inside, she noted. Yes. Recently, before someone decided I should die. She studied him briefly. You risk much returning. I risk more if we don't. They moved just before midnight. Veshra disabled the outer patrol quietly. Pressure points, not blood. Less attention drawn that way. Alric unlocked the side entrance using a key he had kept hidden in his coat lining even after the attack in Velmora. You plan for contingencies, she said. I research corruption, he replied. Contingencies are survival. Inside, corridors echoed faintly with their steps. Candlelight flickered against towering shelves stacked with parchment and bound volumes. They descended a narrow spiral stair to the lower vault where trade contracts were stored. The air smelled of ink and dust. Alric moved directly toward a locked iron cabinet. Eastern Consortium, he murmured. Yearly military supply adjustments. Veshra stood guard at the stairwell while he worked the cabinet lock with careful precision. You are not trained thief, she observed quietly. No, he replied, twisting the final tumbler. But I've learned from watching those who are. The cabinet door creaked open. Inside were leather-bound ledgers, heavy, meticulously organized. He flipped rapidly through pages. There, he whispered. She stepped closer. Columns of numbers. Security expenditures rising sharply before each reported border incident. Payments to unnamed logistical consultants. Discrete transfers matching dates of staged raids. More, she said. He pulled another volume free, this one thinner. Correspondence. Short-coded notes referencing black operations stabilized by external intervention. She felt her jaw tighten. External intervention, she repeated. Your guild, Alric said quietly. Blackfang does not accept contracts labeled as destabilization, she replied. They accept coin. Silence hung heavy. Footsteps echoed faintly above them. Not regular patrol. Too slow. Too deliberate. Veshra extinguished the nearest candle with a swift pinch of her fingers. Someone comes, she whispered. Alric gathered the most incriminating pages quickly, folding them into his inner coat lining. The stairwell creaked softly. A familiar voice drifted downward. You adapt well, Kael'rith said calmly. Veshra exhaled slowly. I expected you. He descended without hurry, hands relaxed at his sides. You infiltrate royal property, he observed. For a scholar. For truth, she replied. His eyes flicked toward Alric. You have escalated. So have those who hired us, she countered. Kael'rith stopped 3 steps above the vault floor. The guild does not question the origin of contracts. It should. That is not its purpose. It should be. He regarded her in silence. You have changed, he said. I have seen the mechanism. And you believe dismantling merchants will restore balance. I believe exposing them fractures the machine. He tilted his head slightly. The guild has already been paid. And it will be paid again, she said. If war resumes. That struck. Blackfang thrived on contracts born from instability. If this conspiracy collapses, Kael'rith said slowly, the guild loses leverage. It loses manipulation, she corrected. Silence lingered. You could still return, he offered. No. Even if I say the guild elders consider clemency, I do not want it. Alric shifted subtly, watching the exchange carefully. Kael'rith's gaze moved between them once more. You protect him with conviction, he observed. Yes. And if he betrays you, then I face that consequence. A faint pause. Then Kael'rith stepped aside from the stairwell. I was not ordered to kill you tonight, he said quietly. Veshra narrowed her eyes slightly. Why not? The guild waits, he replied, to see whether your path succeeds or collapses. And you? He met her gaze evenly. I am evaluating. With that, he ascended the stairs and disappeared into the upper corridor. The archive fell silent again. Alric exhaled slowly. Your mentor hesitates. He calculates, she replied. Is that worse? Yes. She secured the cabinet and motioned toward the stairwell. We have what we need. They moved upward through shadowed shelves and into the night beyond the archive walls. For the first time since the contract had arrived in black wax, they carried something heavier than survival. Proof. And proof, she knew, was sharper than any blade. They did not make it far from the capital before the summons arrived. Not written, not spoken, delivered. A black feather pinned to the trunk of a lone oak along the northern trade road, its tip dipped in dried crimson ink. Black Fang's signal for parley. Veshra stopped the moment she saw it. Alric followed her gaze. That is not merchant, he said quietly. No. Trap. Yes. Will you go? Yes. He exhaled slowly. Of course. They followed the marker off the main road into a clearing surrounded by dense pine. No birds sang. No wind moved. She felt the silence like pressure against her skin. He stepped forward from between the trees before she could call his name. Kael'rith. Not armored for combat. Not cloaked for concealment. Simply present. You come prepared, he observed, eyes flicking briefly to Alric before settling on her. I come aware, she replied. This is not ambush. I assumed it wasn't. Alric remained several paces behind her, tense but silent. Kael'rith studied him briefly. You are more troublesome than expected, he said. I've been told, Alric replied evenly. Kael'rith returned his focus to Veshra. The elders have spoken, and you have broken your oath. I know. The contract was valid under guild law. It was corrupt. Corruption is irrelevant to execution. It should not be. Silence thickened between them. You trained under me for 12 years, Kael'rith said quietly. You were forged in discipline, precision, obedience. I was forged in skill, she corrected. Obedience was assumed. And now I choose where the blade falls. His jaw tightened faintly. The guild does not tolerate selective loyalty. I no longer belong to it. You belong whether you claim it or not, he replied. Your skills, your knowledge, your patterns, those are Blackfawn. Then consider them reclaimed. Kael'rith stepped closer. Do you understand what severing blood oath means? He asked softly. Yes. It means no sanctuary, no contracts, no protection. I accept that. It means any guild operative may end you on sight. I accept that. It means I may be ordered to. She did not hesitate. Then do it now. The words hung heavy in the clearing. Alric inhaled sharply behind her, but did not move. Kael'rith's eyes searched her face. You would face me willingly, he asked. I already have. That was defense. This is decision. Silence stretched long enough for wind to finally stir the treetops. Kael'rith drew his blade. Not quickly, not dramatically. Ritual. Veshra mirrored him. This was not ambush. This was reckoning. Steel met steel in a single measured clash before either advanced further. They circled slowly across the clearing floor, footwork deliberate. You abandoned the guild for a scholar, he said. I abandoned the guild for choice. You think him worthy? I think the truth is. He struck first, not with lethal force, but testing. She parried cleanly. You hesitate, he observed. I evaluate. Their blades locked briefly. You could still walk away, he said. Without ending this, she countered. Without dying. I am not the one dying here. That sharpened his gaze. He attacked harder then. Precision strikes designed to exploit her old training patterns. She broke them deliberately, abandoning Blackfawn form for something less predictable, more instinctive. She did not fight to defeat him. She fought to prove finality. After several exchanges, Kael'rith stepped back first. Breathing steady, unwounded, uncertain. You have changed, he said. Yes. You no longer fight as Blackfawn. No. You fight as something else. Yes. Silence again. Then slowly, Kael'rith lowered his blade. The elders expected this, he said quietly. She did not lower hers. They believe you will fail, he continued. They believe the merchants will crush you, or the crown will silence you. And you? She asked. He studied her one last time. I believe you are no longer weapon. She lowered her blade at last. Then we are done. He stepped back fully, sheathing his weapon. You are severed, he said formally. Blood oath broken. Guild protection revoked. I understand. If our paths cross again under contract, you will not hesitate, she finished. No. He turned away without another word and disappeared between the trees. The clearing felt emptier afterward. Not lighter, but resolved. Alric approached slowly. You just ended your former life, he said quietly. Yes. Do you regret it? She looked toward the direction Kael'rith had vanished. No, you've made powerful enemies. I already had them. And now, she sheathed her blade with quiet finality. Now I fight for something chosen. The wind moved freely through the trees at last. No more feathers. No more summons. She had entered Blackfang as a weapon shaped by others. She walked away from it as something far more dangerous. A blade that answered only to her own will. The Merchant Council did not expect to be hunted. They expected silence to settle after blood. They expected the assassin to complete her contract, the scholar to vanish, and the guild to collect coin without asking who had placed it. They did not expect Veshera to turn the blade. The capital's trade district glittered with polished stone and gold-trimmed balconies, a stark contrast to the shadowed docks and forest roads they had crossed. Carriages rolled through wide streets. Guards in fine livery stood at ornamental gates. Wealth here was visible and guarded. They won't keep records in their homes, Alric said quietly as they observed the Eastern Consortium Hall from across the plaza. No, Veshera agreed. They will keep them where they believe no blade can reach. The counting house. Yes. The counting house sat beneath the main trade hall, a fortified vault where shipments were recorded and contracts sealed before being distributed to affiliated houses. It was not built to repel armies. It was built to repel thieves. Veshera did not intend to steal coin. She intended to steal proof. They entered separately. Alric walked openly through the public atrium, wearing scholar robes instead of travel leathers, carrying a satchel of copied letters as bait. His return to the capital would not yet be widely known. News traveled slower than coin. Veshera entered through a maintenance shaft along the rear of the building, mapped during one of Alric's previous research visits. She moved through narrow stone passages, listening to the rhythm of footsteps above. The counting house lay below street level, reinforced with iron latticed doors and ledger desks arranged in precise rows. 3 guards stood inside. 2 clerks reviewed shipments by lamplight. She waited until Alric's voice echoed faintly from the upper hall. "You've been busy," he called out. Raised voices followed. "Good. Distraction." She dropped silently into the counting room from a ceiling beam, disabling the first guard before he could shout. The second reached for his sword, too slow. She struck the hilt from his grip and drove him backward into a shelf of scroll cases. The third guard attempted to flee up the stairwell. She intercepted. "No alarms," she said quietly, pressing her blade against his collarbone. He froze. Upstairs, footsteps thundered. Alric's voice rose, controlled but loud. "You funded raids under false banners," he declared. "You paid mercenaries to ignite border conflict." "Lies," a merchant lord barked. "Your own ledgers say otherwise." Below, Veshera scanned the central desk. There, a master ledger bound in red leather, thicker than the rest. She opened it quickly. Pages of coded entries, but she recognized patterns now. Shipment surges aligned with reported border clashes. Increased security allocation, followed by private transfers to third-party operatives. She ripped several pages free, folding them into oilcloth to protect against damage. Footsteps thundered down the stairs. Too soon. She stepped back into shadow just as 2 additional guards burst into the counting room. They saw the unconscious bodies. They saw the missing ledger pages. They drew steel. She did not waste words. The fight was brief and brutal. Confined space favored speed over elegance. She ended one with a strike to the throat and disarmed the other with a bone-cracking twist. "Stay down," she warned. Above, shouting intensified. She heard Alric's voice again, calmer now. "Check your vault," he said coldly. A merchant lord stumbled down the stairwell, flanked by guards, fury blazing across his face. He stopped short at the sight of her. "You," he hissed. "Yes," she replied evenly. "You were hired to solve this. I was hired to silence truth. And you failed." "No," she corrected. "You did." Alric descended behind the merchant, holding one of the earlier copied letters in plain view. "You funded Blackfang," he said clearly. "And when the contract faltered, you hired mercenaries to ensure escalation." The merchant's composure fractured. "You have no authority to accuse." "Authority?" Alric interrupted. "Your authority was coin." Veshera stepped forward slowly, blade resting casually at her side. "You underestimated the blade you bought," she said. City guards finally stormed the atrium above, drawn by raised voices and public accusation. The merchant's expression shifted from anger to calculation. You think exposing this saves you? He spat. War will still come. Not from you, Alric replied. The guards entered the counting room moments later, taking in the scene. Unconscious bodies, torn ledgers, merchant lord cornered. Alric handed over the extracted pages without hesitation. These entries correspond to fabricated raids and assassination payments, he said evenly. The captain scanned them quickly, face darkening. This will be reviewed by the crown, he said. It must be, Alric replied. Veshra stepped back, allowing formal authority to close around the merchant. She did not trust the crown entirely, but exposure forced response. As the merchant was led away under guard, he glanced back once. You think the guild will spare you? He sneered. Veshra met his gaze steadily. I do not require sparing. Outside, the capital square buzzed with confusion as words spread rapidly. Merchant scandal, falsified raids, assassination contracts. For the first time since the black wax seal had broken open in her hand, the architects of the chaos stood exposed, and the blade they had purchased no longer belonged to them. Exposure did not end the hunt. It sharpened it. The merchant lord's arrest sent tremors through the capital, but men with coin rarely fell alone. Allies vanished overnight. Documents burned. Witnesses reconsidered their memories. The crown promised inquiry, but inquiry moved slower than vengeance. Blackfang moved faster. Veshra felt it in the air long before she saw proof. Informants stopped whispering when she passed. Dockworkers avoided her gaze. Safe houses once known to her were empty, or worse, recently cleared. They won't strike publicly, Alric said as they relocated to an abandoned watchtower beyond the city walls. Not now that scrutiny surrounds the guild. No, she agreed. They will strike decisively. And privately. Yes. Night settled heavy across the hills. Wind pressed against broken stone and carried distant city noise like fading echoes of a world no longer theirs. Alric laid out the copied ledger pages beside a small lantern. The crown cannot ignore this forever, he said quietly. They can delay, she replied. Delay favors those who erase. She did not argue, because he was right. A faint crunch of gravel sounded below the tower. Too controlled for accident. Veshra extinguished the lantern instantly. They found us, she murmured. How many? She listened. Breath patterns. Footfall spacing. 3, she said. Guild. Yes. Alric exhaled slowly. They won't parley. No. She stepped toward the stairwell as 3 cloaked figures entered the base of the watchtower. They did not rush. They ascended calmly, confidently. The first reached the upper chamber and removed his hood. Not Kael'rith. A younger assassin, sharp-eyed, precise stance. You were offered clemency, he said evenly. I declined, she replied. The elders consider that arrogance. I consider it choice. The second assassin spoke without removing her hood. You expose guild involvement to the crown. I expose merchant corruption, Veshra corrected. You weaken Blackfang. I refuse to be misused. Silence held tight between them. The third assassin stepped forward, blade already drawn. The guild survives by reputation, he said. You fracture that. Then repair it without me, she replied. They attacked as one. No wasted movement. No fury. Pure execution. Veshra moved to meet them at the narrowest point of the chamber, forcing them into single-file engagement. The first blade clashed against hers in a flurry of controlled strikes, testing, adjusting. She pivoted sharply, driving her elbow into his ribs before disengaging. The second assassin pressed from the side, blade aimed for her exposed flank. She twisted, barely deflecting the strike as steel sliced shallow across her shoulder. Pain flared, but she did not falter. Alric remained behind the stone pillar, out of reach, but not idle. He hurled a broken lantern frame down the stairwell, forcing the third assassin to shift footing mid-advance. That momentary imbalance allowed her to strike. She disarmed the first assassin with a brutal wrist lock and drove him back into the stairwell railing. The second lunged low. She stepped inside the arc of the blade and struck upward, precise and final. The third hesitated, calculating. You cannot win long-term, he said. Winning is not survival, she replied. Choices. He attacked harder now, anger finally piercing discipline. She matched it, not with rage, but clarity. Their blades locked briefly, inches from each other's faces. You were forged for this, he hissed. No, she said quietly. I was forged to obey. She broke contact suddenly and kicked him backward down 2 stone steps. He recovered quickly, but not quickly enough. Her blade ended the fight before he could regain stance. Silence swallowed the tower. 3 assassins lay still. Alric stepped forward slowly, face pale but resolute. They sent their best, he said quietly. Not the best, she replied. Who then? She glanced toward the dark horizon. Kael'rith. As if summoned by name, a lone figure appeared at the base of the hill below the tower, unhurried, watching. He did not approach. He did not draw steel. He simply observed. Then, after a long moment, he turned away and vanished into darkness. Alric followed her gaze. He withdraws? He decides, she corrected. Decides what? Whether the guild adapts or doubles down. She wiped her blade clean and sheathed it slowly. The tower felt different now. Not hunted. Tested. They won't chase you endlessly, Alric said. No, she agreed. They will reassess. And the merchants? They are already collapsing under crown scrutiny. He studied her carefully. You've crossed every line available to you. Yes. And yet you stand. Yes. Wind moved through the broken stone windows, carrying the faint scent of approaching dawn. The final hunt had not ended in her death. It had ended in survival. But survival was not the goal anymore. Now, the blade had been turned publicly, and there would be no returning it to shadow. The arrests began quietly, not with public declarations, but with sealed warrants and escorted carriages at dawn. Merchant estates were searched, counting houses audited. Several consortium heads disappeared from their balconies and reappeared under guard within crown custody. The capital buzzed with rumor before official statements ever reached the streets. The crown could not ignore the ledger pages once they circulated beyond palace walls. Too many signatures. Too many seals. Too much coin traced into blood. Veshera watched it unfold from the edge of the city, standing atop a low ridge where farmland gave way to stone roads. She did not step into the celebrations that began to rise in quieter districts. She did not seek recognition. She had never been trained for applause. Alric stood beside her, cloak drawn tight against the morning chill. It worked, he said quietly. For now, she replied. You don't sound relieved. I sound realistic. He smiled faintly at that. The guild, he asked. They have withdrawn contracts tied to the consortium, she said. No new assignments connected to border destabilization. Retreat. Recalibration. And you? She considered that. Blackfang had not issued another summons. No feathers. No blades in the dark. Only silence. Kael'rith had not returned. Perhaps that was mercy. Perhaps strategy. I am no longer target, she said slowly. Nor asset. Then what are you? She looked toward the horizon where sunlight spilled across the fields. Unclaimed. The word felt unfamiliar. Unclaimed meant no oath binding her hand. No elders directing her blade. No coin deciding her morality. Alric shifted slightly, watching the city below. You could disappear, he said. Find work far from politics. Yes. You won't. No. He nodded once, as if he had expected that answer. The crown summoned him formally 2 days later to testify before a public inquiry. He went openly, bringing copies of letters and ledgers. Merchant corruption could no longer be dismissed as rumor. When he returned that evening, exhaustion lined his face, but something steadier lived in his eyes. They questioned everything, he said. My methods, my sources, even you. I expected that. I told them the truth. She raised an eyebrow slightly. Which truth? That an assassin chose conscience over contract. She almost scoffed. They will not like that narrative. No, he agreed. But they cannot ignore it. Word spread beyond the capital in the weeks that followed. Trade routes stabilized. Border skirmishes decreased. The crown issued reforms tightening oversight of military contracts. The merchant consortium fractured into smaller houses, less unified, less powerful. War had not been prevented forever, but it had been delayed, redirected away from manufactured conflict. One evening, as twilight painted the sky in muted violet, Veshera stood in the courtyard of a modest estate offered to Alric as secure residence under crown protection. You are free to remain, he said quietly. I am not yours to protect. I know. Silence lingered between them. You saved my life, he said. I nearly ended it. But you didn't. She met his gaze steadily. I did not. He stepped closer, careful but unafraid. What will you do now? He asked. She looked down at her hands, scarred, steady, trained for precision killing. For years, I was blade shaped by others, she said quietly. Now I choose where it falls. And where is that? Where manipulation hides. You intend to hunt corruption. Yes. Alone. She considered. I do not know yet. Wind moved gently through the courtyard trees. You could stay, he offered. As what? Advisor. Protector. Ally. She studied him. You trust easily. No, he said softly. I trust deliberately. That struck deeper than he realized. She turned toward the open gate, where the city lights flickered against the deepening sky. I was forged in shadow, she said. But shadow does not own me. No, he agreed. It doesn't. She stepped forward, then paused. If the crown falters, she said without turning back. If corruption rises again, I'll send word, he finished. She nodded once. Then she walked beyond the gate. Not as assassin, not as fugitive, not as guild weapon, as something far rarer. A blade governed by her own will. And as dawn crept slowly across the eastern horizon, casting gold over stone and steel alike, the world did not know whether to fear her or to be grateful, but it would learn. Because she no longer struck for coin. She struck for choice. And that made her far more dangerous than any contract ever had.